stories are important for us as people and as cultures, because the hero's journey is a great example of this. The hero's journey takes a character, a protagonist, through a journey that helps them to change and to grow. And really, that's what stories have helped us to do for centuries. They've helped us to understand the world that we live in, and they've helped us to grow as people and to grow as groups of people. And it's because as we follow this character through the events of their story, we connect it to our own lives.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 230 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with Jacob Hess. Now, Jacob is an author who believes that stories inspire us, convict us, and encourage us as we struggle through a world not as it should be. This is what Jacob seeks for his stories to do. He wants to tell new stories built on the tried and true pillars of tales centuries old, stories that connect to our deepest longings and speak to our greatest fears. We have a chat about world building, character creation, his incorporation of the hero's journey, and so much more. And that's coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word about this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Findaway Voices. Now, Findaway Voices just announced January 18th, 2020 on their blog, and I'll have a link to it over in the show notes. Authors, we've got you covered. Enter to win! So Marketplace is launching soon, and they're offering a chance to win a free audiobook launch marketing kit. Now, your audiobook cover and book blurb are the most important marketing assets that you can control. Potential customers use these two things in addition to reviews to determine whether or not to hit the buy button. And that's why now, through June 1st, 2022, Findaway Voices is giving away 6 audiobook launch marketing kits that include a custom cover, book blurb, and cover launch post. So how do you enter? All you have to do is register your name, email, and the audiobook title you intend to create when Marketplace launches. Then, when Marketplace officially launches for authors, get your project started, cast your narrator, and get in production by the first of the month for a chance to win. 2 winners are going to be selected each month, so the earlier you get your book started, the more chances you have to win. Now, they're picking 2 winners on April 1st, 2 on May 1st, and 2 on June 1st. And this is the year 2022 for anyone listening to this in the distant future. But every registered author with a production in their workflow during those months will be part of the drawing. Findaway Voices is excited to help a handful of lucky authors make it on a Marketplace. And that's one of the things I love about Findaway Voices is they're always doing new and innovative things to have you covered. You can check this out if you're thinking about doing an audiobook. Why not have this opportunity to check it out and get access to these amazing marketing resources? Now, in my personal update, I'm going to share a further update about one of the great reasons why you should be thinking about Findaway Voices, and that's the Chirp deal I had. I'll be giving an update on how well that is going, and oh my goodness, I am so thrilled to share that with you. But that's just one of the things, or 2 of the things, or just a handful of the things that you can get when you use Findaway Voices. So if you are looking to take control of your audiobook destiny, look no further than Findaway Voices. And if you want to look at Findaway Voices, you can check them out over at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. And now time for a bit of a personal update. So as mentioned in the ad read for Findaway Voices, I had a Chirp deal. So the Chirp deal was on January 9th. That's when the email went out, but the price actually went into effect a couple days earlier. And it was on A Canadian Werewolf in New York, which is the first full-length book in that universe, in that series. And then I also dropped, based on a suggestion from the good folks at Chirp, when they accepted the deal, I dropped Stowaway, the novella, which is kind of book 1.5 in the series. It's about 25,000 words. I dropped that to 99 cents as well. And then Fear and Longing in Los Angeles, which is technically the third book in the series, or book 2, and I dropped that to $1.99. And of course, Fright Night's Big City is on its way soon. But I only have those three. I left This Time Around, which is a 10,000 word short story. I left it at full price, $3.99. No, because I didn't want to encourage people to buy it, because it's meant to be sort of a teaser. Hey, if you get this 10,000 word short story that's really cheap, then maybe you'll like the full length book. And it's free in ebook, but I can't make the audiobook free. Although I am thinking about just dropping that after this promo is over to 99 cents. To potentially appeal to people. We'll see how that works, but I'll burn that bridge when I'm standing on it. But back to the Chirp deal, because I'm excited about this. So I just did more analysis on it, and so I'm recording this on January 20th, 2022. And so I did see the biggest increase, obviously, on the 9th when Chirp sent out the email. That makes the most sense, right? The day that they're going to push it and promote it is the day that I did really well. So that day saw 672 units sold. I even sold in the prior 2 days before that. I sold 25, which is great because I hadn't sold a single one, well, in a long time on Chirp. They were just kind of here and there, ones and twos, but I hadn't sold a single audiobook in January yet. So that was exciting to see 25 on the 7th and 8th. 9th was a big day. It kind of was going down. It kind of popped up again a little bit on the 22nd, but in total, just to get to the grand total, I moved over 1,200 units, and I didn't write it down before I shut down the browser, and I'm not going back to do that. Just a little aside here. When I'm using Audacity and I have a Firefox open, because I have 50 billion windows and tabs open, it hogs a lot of bandwidth and actually causes issues with the audio, where sometimes my operating system can't handle that load, and so it just causes audio issues. So often when I'm recording, I shut down the Firefox browser, so I have to go do my research, write things down, and I didn't write this down. So that's my little aside. But more than 1,200 units in the series, and that's the 3 full books and that one short story of 10,000 words. And so far, just under, and again, I glanced at it briefly because I wasn't really concerned about the money at this point. I was trying to get more readers into this universe. But it was just under $800 US. So again, I haven't earned my money back on the creation of these audiobooks, but hey, it's way closer than I have been ever. So I'm pretty thrilled about that. It's still trending on the sci-fi list on Chirp, and it's spent a week or more now, right beside Lindsay Broker's Dragon's Gate. Oh, Dragon Gate, I should say. And I'm to be anywhere near, sitting anywhere near on any of the online platforms, such a superstar, 6-figure author, I'll take that. So I'm pretty thrilled about that. I think earlier I was excited because I was sandwiched between Lindsay Broker's Dragon Gate and a traditionally published Spider-Man story. And I was like, oh my God. So it was just very exciting for me. Took lots of screenshots. So A Canadian Werewolf in New York. And here's the other cool thing about it. It's not just moving them, but apparently people are liking it. So I have 39 reviews and ratings, which is a 4.0 average. And this is funny. So it's a 4-point average despite, oh my God, some real 1-star haters on this in the group. And this often happens, especially when you drop the price to 99 cents, because the resistance that says, well, this isn't my cup of tea, when it's $8, $9, $10, $12, $15, whatever, people are more hesitant to pay for it. But when they pay only $1 for it, confirmation bias assumes it's crappy because it was only $1, or people who may not have bought it because it didn't look quite right, that it's only $1, and that kind of leads to this. But I mean, there are people who hated it. They hated my writing. They hated my voice. They hated the character. They thought it was meandering. And of course it's meandering. That's just part of the style of this narrator. And obviously part of the way that I write in that. But there, I mean, I'm not just, down on myself. I'm just saying there were a number of people who just couldn't stand it and were very excited to say how much they hated it. Oh, well, I guess it means they're not my ideal target audience of readers, because there were people who loved it. And I've actually been messaged by some folks who are just binging it, going, oh my God, I just finished book 1. I just finished Stowaway, and I'm just on Fear and Longing. Oh my God. And I just nonstop. They can't wait to get through it. So I'm pretty thrilled about that. So again, yeah, there's enough haters, and that's going to happen when there's a lot of units moved. But there are enough people that love it, and I'm pretty excited about that. So Stowaway, 14 reviews and ratings with a 4.1 average, and Fear and Longing in Los Angeles, 7 reviews and ratings with a 4.1 average. So the series average, because Chirp shows that, is a 4.2 out of 5. So, I mean, I could always be more excited, but I'm absolutely thrilled with this Chirp deal. This is definitely, it was free, of course, because it's currently free. It was definitely something I would pay for because I've moved it. Now, the downside is translating. How will this translate in the long run? So over time, after, a little time has passed, I'm going to have to measure, what's happening here. So when I release Fright Night's Big City, when I get that from Scott and I push that into the ecosystem, are people who liked it, are they willing to pay the full price, which is only probably going to be somewhere, it's probably going to be less than $10 anyways. Are they going to want to move over to that? And how does this translate for sales everywhere else? I'm just curious about that. The other thing that's unmeasurable and you can't really track is looking at the people who have listened to it on Chirp and then tell a friend who goes and buys the paperback or ebook on whatever platform or requests it from the library. Those are the things you can't control and you can't really measure, but I know they exist, and so that's why I'm just ecstatic about the results of this. And I thought about something a second ago, and I thought, I should mention that as well. And of course, I've completely dropped it. Oh well, I'm sure it'll come back sometime, and I'll mumble it into something where you're going to go, oh my God, he's just going off on all of these tangents. But I am pretty thrilled about that, and I'll probably be talking about a few more things that I'm going to do for promotions of that series. Once I get the audiobook up, I get all kinds of other options and opportunities, and I'm pretty thrilled about that. So that's it for sort of the Chirp update. Other things to mention are Story Bundle. So I have a story bundle, and it's storybundle.com. If you go to storybundle.com and you check, right now there's only one available there, so it'll pop up immediately. But I think it's /writing, or you'll see it's the writing one. It is the Write for the Win story bundle. And the Write for the Win bundle was curated by Melissa Snark and myself. And this is a bundle of 10 books and an online course. So the way that Story Bundle works, and it's storybundle.com, is you can pay, I think it's $5, and you get 4 books. And the first 4 books are Author Smarter Bootcamp by Michelle Fox. And this is Hacks, Strategy, Mindset from the Mind of Michelle Fox. You have Carol Wolf's Playwriting, the Merciless Craft. You have Superstructure, The Key to Unleashing the Power of Story by James Scott Bell. And you have Taking the Short Tack, which is written by Maddie Dalrymple and myself as co-authors. So for $5, you get all 4 of those books, which is kind of cool. But you and you can pay what you want for those, of course. But I think it's the $5 is the thing. And then if you pay for the bonus, which is $20, you get all 10 books. And those 10 books include, my book, Wide for the Win, hence the Write for the Win story bundle. That was the what do you call that? The core title that we started off with when I was talking to Melissa. Then you have Tobias S. Buckles, It's All Just a Draft. You have Honoré Corder's Prosperity for Writers. You have Becca Syme's Dear Writer, Are You in Burnout? You have Jay Thorne and Zach Bohannon's 3-Story Method. You have Gail Carriger's The Heroine's Journey. And then, so those are the 10 books in total. And then you get a coupon, a $22 value coupon from Margie Lawson, Empower Your Writing. And there's a choice from some of the online courses you can take. So even just that course alone, the $22 value, you're $2 ahead, and you get 10 ebooks. I'm pretty thrilled. It ends in 15 days, actually less than that, 14 days and 12 hours as I'm recording this on January 20th, 2022. So you want to take advantage for that. It's at storybundle.com/writing. And I'm pretty thrilled with that. It's moving along quite nicely, but what a great way to get that book into, or those books into writers' hands, and what a great opportunity to get 10 books for $20. And I'm pretty thrilled about that. So that's also going on. Now I'm going to take a bit of a break. I'm going to play a bit of a sounder, and I'm going to talk about one of the really scary, terrifying, negative things related to making your books returnable with print on demand. And that's coming up right after the bumper. Okay, so I went and logged back into Ingram Spark, and I looked at the dozens of invoices, and I went into my online account, and I was looking at the details, and I'll be honest with you, after spending 45 minutes trying to figure this out for probably the third time in the last several months, I give up. I can't actually figure it out. What I can figure out is the returns cost me probably 3 to 5 times more than I earn on the sales. And I'll give you a perfect example. So Canadian Werewolf in New York, hardcover, sells for $25.99 US. When that happens through Ingram Spark, I earn $1.22 US. I earn like buy the hardcover, and I earn way less than I earn on the ebook. But that's okay. It's whatever. It's just part of the business. But I did make the hardcovers returnable because I was just trying to appeal to. I gave it the deep discount 55%, which means the bookstores get 40%, which means I basically make nothing. Or even less than I would make if that were traditionally published. And, well, at least I get it regularly. But when it's returned, and this is the thing that drives me nuts, because the cost of the return is almost impossible to sell because of the way they blend things in and merge things in, and they have different, like I had a $25 charge on something that was related to a return for a different invoice on top of it, whatever. But it looks like, based on the returns, that the return costs me somewhere in the realm of $8 to $15. So I sell a book, and they'll pay me, $1.22 for it. I get that, and they pay me for it. They're good about that. But then how many months later, could be 9 months later, that gets returned. That same book that I earned $1.22 on, I lose somewhere between $8 and $15. I suddenly owe them because of the handling fee and the return process, etc. So you're only making like this tiny margin because you have to pay the print cost and stuff like that. But on the return, you pay the full value of that product, which is just highway robbery. And I don't think it's the same as traditional publishing where books are warehoused and stuff like that, because there's, it's a back and forth flow. So it's a really scary situation to be in. I did this in 2004, where I was hundreds of dollars in the hole. Right now, I'm about to pay an invoice for $542.67 US for returns on a combination of the hardcovers in my Canadian Werewolf series, as well as the book that I published for my friend Peter Mitchell, who is homeless in London, England, Rude Awakenings from Sleeping Rough. I made that book fully returnable because I wanted to appeal to get it into bookstores, but I just got a giant box of them back. Giant box. It was only 15, but that was a significant cost. Now, because I published this book, I paid him in advance, and I didn't worry about him earning out the advance. I just did a royalty share, and I sent him money for the Ingram payments, the paperback, etc., and the ebook are through Draft to Digital, so he's getting paid directly every time those sell. And again, he earns way more on the ebook than he earns on the hardcover or even the paperback. But so I was doing this to try to help him have a source of income, to help him get him out of his situation. And so when I get a bill for hundreds of dollars, I'm not going to come back and go, "Hey Peter, you owe me whatever," because the whole point of doing this anthology, the whole point of doing this book for him was me leveraging some of my experience in publishing, paying for the cover design and paying to get this book produced so that I could help him, because he would not take charity. So it's not like I'm going to turn around and go, "Hey, dude, you owe me $350 or whatever." So that's just a weird and awkward situation. But yeah, here I am with $542.67 US dollars. So that's what, $800 Canadian that I have to suddenly pay for at the beginning of the year. And it's a cautionary story to you, dear author, for why returns on print on demand are so painful, and you need to be aware of them. Now, I did this knowing I was taking a risk, and I still have my Canadian Werewolf hardcovers as returnable, because again, the volume of the sales on those was small, and the returns on those was minimal. Most of that money owing is coming from Rude Awakenings from Sleeping Rough, and yeah, so that's just a difficult situation. But I wanted to share that with you, dear listener, as a cautionary tale about the huge cost of returns. This is one of the reasons why we think publishers are greedy. Publishers have to cover these kinds of costs. Again, those costs are not as ridiculous, but the volume and all the titles they have can become ridiculous, and their cash flow situation is very challenging, where there are certain times of the year where they're making money and certain times of the year where the bookstores are getting rid of stuff and the publisher's going, "Oh my God," which is why when I get paid from Dundurn, for example, one of my traditional publishers, there's a 30% withholding fee. So for every $100 I earn, they pocket, or they keep 30% of that held back. They only pay me $70, and they put that $30 into a pool to cover the cost of returns, because I get my sales, and then they subtract returns out of that. But then there's always the potential that there will be returns in the next season, and so they're constantly doing that because it's the only way they can stay in the black and not go into the red. And so this is one of the reasons why I do have respect for traditional publishers, because they bear this outrageous and ridiculous cost. That was a bit of a rant, wasn't it? Okay, come on. We're way over 20 minutes for the introductory stuff. I'm just going to forego comments, and I am going to say, hey, why don't we get right into... Seriously, like, how many times do I say right into instead of actually just admitting that I babbled on for 20 minutes in the introduction? So let me try that again. Okay, enough of the introduction. Why don't we get into this great interview with Jacob Hess? Jacob, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great to be chatting with you. I want to talk a little bit about your entryway into the world of writing. Where did it all begin for you?
Yeah, so as a kid growing up, I was really always interested in world building and in characters and in stories. I would kind of play out my own stories, in my backyard, that kind of thing. I wasn't super into writing or even reading at that time, but it was more like through like movies and TV, I think, growing up initially. And my love for writing really started to grow through my studies, actually. Just writing about things that I loved in college and also in my master's program. And that then eventually my love for stories merged with my love for reading and writing. And that's when I decided to do fiction. So
cool.
Yeah.
And so what have you written in terms of fiction? What's out there in the world?
So I'm working on my first series, which is the Bright Abyss series, and it's a mix between Star Wars and Lord of the Rings in this kind of fantastical universe that I created, where there's this boy who holds the secrets to destroying these creatures that are trying to consume the universe. And so he has to go on this journey similar to like Frodo, or Luke Skywalker, to kind of face some of his inner demons, but also the outer darkness as well that is trying to consume all of life.
Okay, so that's a really good segue into we did want to talk a little bit about the hero's journey. Obviously, yeah. I think Luke Skywalker and Frodo, two perfect examples of Campbell's.
Right.
Was the hero's journey part of your scholarly work, or where did your passion for that come from?
No, not necessarily. So my passion for the hero's journey really came through some of this as I was trying to struggle writing fiction, it's kind of hard, especially when you're just getting into. I was used to nonfiction type stuff, so I was really struggling with how to help my characters develop in a way that's satisfying for the audience and in a way that connects well with the outer arc of my story. And so I came across the Story Grid, if you're familiar with
Yep.
yeah, that was really helpful reading his book by Sean Coyne wrote that. And he is big on the story, the hero's journey, in structuring the development of his characters. And so I just kind of went in deep, was studying that kind of stuff, and I applied it to my own stories. And I discovered that the hero's journey really is baked into a lot of the stories that I loved growing up. And so it helped me to emulate these other stories that I love as well.
So can I ask, were you in love with some of the J.R. Tolkien tales? Maybe the early George Lucas works as well?
Yes, yeah. Star Wars is what I grew up on. My mom was a big fan back when it came out, and so I don't remember the first time I watched Star Wars because I watched it so young. So and she actually read to me the Lord of the Rings books when I was a kid.
That must have been amazing.
Yeah, and only recently, after I was getting done with my master's program, did I read them all for myself.
Okay.
And I read them in like 3 months. Like I just kind of tore through them. So
I mean, was your mom reading them to you at bedtime? Is that what it was, like a chapter a night or something like that, or?
No, so I was homeschooled when I was younger, and so it was kind of a part of my studies, I guess.
Oh, cool. Okay. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, was it all oral, or were you reading it together, or was she actually reading it aloud to you?
She was reading it aloud to me, so I would read to her, and then she would read to me. So it was like, yeah.
That's cool. That is what an enriching way to experience a book with somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, my partner and I had that opportunity. We were reading, ironically, at the beginning of the pandemic, George R. Stewart's Earth Abides, which is a classic science fiction novel I've read multiple times. And so I had to read it for a podcast I was going to be on to talk about like books that you've read multiple times. And we did that. We took turns reading a chapter. I would read a chapter to her, but she had a second book, so she was following along while I was reading it. And then she would read the next chapter, and I would follow along while she read it. And what a different experience than just reading it or just listening to it.
That's cool. Like that's something I should do with my wife. We both love reading, so
what a great way to because a book is just you and then the author's voice.
Right.
Or the narrative in front of you, but when you introduce like two people reading it simultaneously at the same time, it's the only way you can like we can listen to a song together and we can kind of look at each other and go, yeah, I love that rhythm, or I love these lyrics, or whatever. But you usually don't do that with a book. Usually it's like, no, the book, you've got it like this, and then you put it down and go, oh, that was cool, right? Are you on chapter 3 yet? No, I'm not there yet. Oh, okay, wait. Anyways, cool. I'm getting onto the reader journey, not the hero's journey.
Right. They're both important,
So Tolkien, you were a fan of Tolkien. Now, there's a quote that I saw in your bio from Tolkien that I think is pertinent. Can you share that with the listeners, please?
Yes. So that quote from Tolkien, it's from his book on fairy stories, and it is the pot of soup. The cauldron of story has always been boiling, and to it have continually been added new bits, dainty and undainty. So, yeah, I don't know what I mean. You can tell me what you loved about that, but what I loved about his perspective on story is just how historical it is. It's like he goes way back to like the beginning of time and shows how like story has been something that shaped our cultures as well as our personal lives. And so I thought it was really, really cool.
I've always been fascinated by that when we think about story as something that was fundamentally something we've always had with us.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about how that speaks to you?
Yeah. So I think stories are important for us as people and as cultures, because I mean, the hero's journey is a great example of this. The hero's journey takes a character, our protagonist through a journey that helps them to change and to grow. And really, that's what stories have helped us to do for centuries. They've helped us to understand the world that we live in, and they've helped us to grow as people and to grow as groups of people. And it's because as we follow this character through the events of their story, we connect it to our own lives. Like Luke Skywalker, like, is facing this crazy galactic empire that's trying to destroy everything, but he's also facing, an estranged father. And so he's struggling with these outward forces and these inner forces. And those are the same kind of forces that we struggle with through our own individual lives and through the lives of our cultures. And so they help us to grow, to learn new things, and to become better people, hopefully, through engaging with those stories.
So thank you. That is a really good segue into developing character and character development. That's something you're very passionate about, right?
Yes, I love my characters really drive the story that I try to write, the stories that I try to write. And I think it's important to have characters that help stretch people, that bring them to places they haven't been, but also connect with them and with things that they're facing in their own lives. So I want people to experience almost the same change as the character is in my story, as they grow and as they learn and as they face challenges.
So you've used StoryGrid to help with story structure, etc. Do you have any tools or that you use when you're developing or creating a character?
I use a lot of StoryGrid stuff as well for that, and what that looks like is kind of starting big picture. So I look at to see where my character begins and where they end up, and all that stuff in the middle is that transformation process. And the StoryGrid has some great tools. They call it the Fool's Cap, which is like your story in one page, right? Which is really helpful because you can put down the different segues of your story as it progresses. And it's really helpful for me personally to see where, like I said, where my character begins and where he ends up, and the things that he faces, the challenges and the successes that he faces along the way help him become that person that I want him to be at the end of the story. And also, I also have my theme, my big idea sentence. This is kind of the lesson, or as you will, of the story, and that helps really shape the character and what kind of things they're facing as they go through that story. And that can morph. That theme can morph as I write, but I try to start out with a theme, and then allow my character to influence that as I write the story.
Okay, thank you. So I like this exercise because I think it can help illustrate to other writers how you do this. So The Bright Abyss, let's talk specifically about that since you're intimately familiar with that novel. So The Bright Abyss, what is the main theme, or what is that main sort of question that this book is about?
Yes. So here, let me just pull it up real quick. The Bright Abyss, my foolscap.
Oh, you still have it somewhere. Cool.
Yes, I do. Yeah. So it's like controlling idea main theme is what it's called. And mine is when you exchange your false beliefs for the truth and depend on power from above, you can overcome your inner fears and the evil that faces you.
Okay. All right.
So that's kind of the main theme for the first story.
And is that did you have that first story first, or did you have the grand story arc, like that 12 books of the Lord of the Rings in mind when you started this one?
I had a 3-part series in mind.
So you kind of knew the big picture, and then this was the vision or the statement for book 1?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does that mean you have the full scat pages for all the other books, or is that a work in progress?
Yeah, so I just do it one book at a time. And in my mind, I do have where I want my character to eventually end up, but I don't do the work to make the full caps for each one until I get to that book. I actually am working on book 3 right now. So I do have a full cap for each book. but I
Okay.
didn't start out with that.
Okay, so does that means that book 2 then, if you're working on book 3, book 2 is
Mhm.
complete or in that process
Yes.
somewhere? Okay.
Yeah. Book 3 is in the last stages of editing. I hope to have it out next year.
Awesome. So what
Mhm.
what is your process? So you start off with this sheet, and then how do you
Yes.
how do you get into the meat and bones of it?
Well, so I start out with the foolscap, which is my story in one page. And then from that, I kind of just jump in. I don't do a lot of I don't like write out every scene and like what I'm
Right.
going to have for every scene. I kind of just, I don't know if this is like a good practice or not, but I love the just creating as I go
Okay.
and allowing the story to change as I write. And it often does. Like I usually
Yeah.
keep the same like major points of the story that I've outlined, but I get there different than maybe I thought originally.
Okay.
And a lot of great stuff comes out as I write, and my characters, really come alive. And I love world building, but my world building really comes out of my story. And
Okay.
so my characters are doing things, and as they do things, they have to interact with the world around them. And so that's when I do my character kind of world building work as I'm writing my scenes. And once I'm done with the first draft, a story grid also has what they call the story grid spreadsheet, which is putting your every scene through this Excel sheet basically. And then there's these different columns, like you have an abbreviation of what the scene is. Then you have the action of the scene. Is it an action scene? Is it a revelation scene? The revelation scene would be like revealing something new to the character.
Right.
Action would be the character is doing something in the scene. And then you have like value shifts, and there's all these minute little things about it, and you're really like trying to understand, okay, what is really going on in this scene? Is it working? By working, I mean, is it moving the story forward? Is it moving the character forward? And once I put it through the spreadsheet, I can find out what's not working and try to fix that.
I like that, where you're taking every single scene and
Right.
making sure that it's doing something that is going to
Right.
move you to that end. So it reminds me a lot of the stuff I did in theater, where
Mm-hmm.
often it's important for an actor to know their character's motivation. So what does the character want in this scene? I want to be left
Right.
alone, or it doesn't have to be anything dramatic, but what
Right.
does the character want? And then that helps I guess, with the conflict, with the engagement, and how the characters interact with one another. Is that the same sort of thing then, when you're looking at a scene? Is
Right.
you get to a scene and you go, well, this actually doesn't move the action forward, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. What happens when you get to that point where you go, wait a second, this scene doesn't have any of that?
Yes. So that what you're talking about is the essential action of the
Okay.
scene.
Right.
Like this is what the character wants in the scene. And I actually, with my last draft, I had quite a few scenes where that was kind of mushy. And
Okay.
so I actually had a story grid editor help me kind of work through some of that stuff. But I implemented a new editing technique. Just it's a new more in-depth scene analysis
Okay.
that goes a little deeper than the spreadsheet, and this really focuses on the essential action. So what I did was I went through every scene and I said, okay, what does my character want at the beginning of the scene, and then how do they end up at the end of the scene? So the scene analysis takes you through the inciting incident. How does this scene begin?
Right.
What starts the action? Then it goes to the turning point, which is if the scene starts negative, does it turn positive? Or if it starts positive, does it turn negative? So you look at the action that really turns the scene.
Yeah.
And then the crisis is, okay, what question is being put before the character? Do they need to do something? Do they need to believe something? Do they need to become something to face that crisis? And then
Right.
the climax is what the character does, and then the resolution is what happens.
Okay.
So for every scene, I noted each one of those things, and the essential action really helps with that, because if the character doesn't have an essential action, they're not going to be facing a crisis. And I mean, sometimes other characters help the main character face, or the scene's perspective character face those climaxes and those crises. But
Right.
the person who you're telling, the eyes that the audience is reading the story through, should really, the character who they're seeing the story through should really be making those decisions and facing those crises.
I love how complex and layered your process seems to be, in order to kind of, almost feels like you're refining all this raw material into something and making sure that
Right.
everything's working, or else
Right.
you got to kill those darlings, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's I think about it like when you're trying to sculpt a statue out of a thing of marble, you need that marble. You need that like bit of clay. You need that marble, which is really the first draft. You can't do anything if you don't have a first draft. But these editing tools that I use really help me chip away the things that I don't need, helps me put on some things that I might need to add. And eventually it looks like something instead of just being a lump of clay. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You've gotten rid of everything that doesn't look exactly like the sparrow that you want it to become.
Right.
Or whatever.
Right.
Okay. Awesome. So something else that occurs to me is, so we talked about your novel, The Bright Abyss,
Mm-hmm.
being Star Wars, Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are folks who, like me, will go back and forth between fantasy and science fiction, although
Right.
you can argue that Star Wars isn't science fiction so much as space fantasy, but
Right.
maybe that's
Yeah.
the reality. But so, in terms of people who say, well, I love Star Wars, but I don't like Lord of the Rings, or I love
Mhm.
Lord of the Rings, or I don't like Star Wars, how do you, like, if you have to kind of flip from one to the other, how do you do that?
I would say my story is definitely more it's very soft science. And so
Okay.
it's more fantastical than it is like hard science.
Okay.
And so in that sense, it's more like a Star Wars, which is
Right.
which they're not like, I mean, there's a lot of people who have taken the science of Star Wars to the next level,
Yeah.
but the first trilogy is like, it's a bright sword, you know, like they shoot
Yeah.
laser guns, you know what I mean?
Or you push a
So-
button and you're in hyperdrive.
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm not
Okay.
going into the in-depth science. I'm
Yeah.
really putting these characters in a fantastical world that mirrors our own, but I'm not going in depth. So I'm like, my background is not science and
Right.
like chemistry and all that kind of stuff.
and in both cases, it's an ultimate fight between good and evil, obviously.
Yeah.
So is that the same thing true for The Bright Abyss?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's this darkness that is really behind the scenes of a lot of the political upheavals that are happening throughout the series, and the main characters are really trying to face that darkness underneath, like the bad, government, or the bad, characters on the
Right.
scene. So yeah, there's this hidden darkness that they're facing, and that they actually find within themselves as well. So there's similar things to like Luke, facing the dark side and trying
Right.
to fight against that. And Frodo, like struggling with keeping his mission on focus, not letting the ring take him over and that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
yeah, there's similar themes to that.
I like that. Was there anything, so you've got book 1 and book 2 that the work is mostly done.
Mhm.
Was there anything, so you kind of mapped it out on the foolscap, and then you did a bit of discovery
Mhm.
writing within the layers of that.
Yeah.
Was there anything that surprised you that the characters did, or that a scene happened that you thought,
Mhm.
that's not how I imagined that?
Well, I'm finding that I always try to hold back too much.
Okay.
With the first book, I didn't go far enough. And then with the second book, there was something that I wanted to reveal later, and it just needed to be revealed sooner. And because it just wasn't working the way it was. And so I think that is a danger with writing a series. Like, you want to hold all your cards to the very end, but
Right.
to really help your characters grow and to really kind of let your standalone story be a good story, you need to reveal those things and let things happen, and let the next book worry about itself. Like things
Right.
will, come up for that next book.
So that means like at the end of book one, you've resolved the big issue pertinent to book one, but there's a larger story arc that is coming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And in the second book, I don't want to give too much away, but there's something big that happens with one of the main characters, that really has an impact on the protagonist that I wanted to save until the end,
Right.
but it really needed to happen really in the middle of the story. And so I pushed it back to the middle.
Okay. That's
Mhm.
cool. So
Yeah.
you've got book one is out. When did book one come out?
Book one came out last October.
Okay.
Yeah.
October. Okay. All right. And then book two is when is that gonna show up?
I don't have a specific date as of right now, but I do have, I'm working on the final edits of it. And then I have a line by line editor that is going to work her way through it. And so that should hopefully be out before summer.
Okay.
So I'm hoping sometime next spring.
Okay. All right. Cool. Awesome. So you've got
Yeah.
that all of those sort of in progress on the
Mhm.
way. So 2020, 2022, and then the
Yeah.
next one will be coming afterwards.
Yeah.
Are there other things that you work on while you're working on this? Like, do you write short fiction, or are there other pieces that you're still working on in the midst of
Um,
this?
so I work full time. So this is really what I do. The other parts of my life,
Okay.
So I don't have a whole lot of time to write other things. I did write one short story, which you can actually get for free, at my website by signing up for my email list. You can head there, and it's a short story that is from the perspective of one of the main characters in The Bright Abyss,
Okay.
and kind of some backstory for that. So I've done that, but I haven't done a whole lot of. I did, and then I wrote a nonfiction as well. That's just kind of a short book about. It's called Echoes of Beauty, and it kind of focuses on my passion for writing stories and
Oh, cool.
how I want them to, be expressions of, beauty for people to experience, and how important stories are for our day-to-day life.
Cool.
So,
Awesome.
yeah.
So working full time and then having this epic
Right.
sort of story, kind of like the George Lucas dream, going, well, I've got this story, but it's going to take me a long time to get it
Right.
out there. How do you manage your time in terms of writing time? So
Mhm.
obviously you've got family, you've got work commitments. Where do you
Yeah.
fit the writing in?
I try to write an hour a day. So
Okay.
I just kind of chip away at it a little bit, little by little. And I have a specific goal in mind when I sit down to write, because with a big project like this, there is so much you could be doing and little things you could get distracted on. So I kind of have in my mind, I have where I'm at in my project, and I just pick up where I left off. Like today I'm writing such and such scene, or
Okay.
today I need to edit, but I need to edit with this lens in mind,
Okay.
So that helps me keep focused for that hour, because it's not really a lot, but 1 hour a day, it does add up.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because you're getting all the bits and pieces done as you go. Is there
Yeah.
anything that you would have advised your earlier, younger Jacob when he was first thinking about wanting to? Hey, I like story. I want to work with this. I've got these ideas. Any advice you'd go back and
Yeah.
give him?
I would advise him to read a few books from some experts, like StoryGrid, or there's this other book by Jeff Vandermeer called Wonder Book, which is great on a world building. But when I first started, I was kind of floundering. Like I had in mind, I was a fine writer, but I wasn't a good storyteller necessarily.
Okay.
And so I had to restart all, like, because it just wasn't working what I was writing. And so it took a long time learning from some people who knew more than I did about storytelling, and to get something that actually was worth keeping. So
Yeah.
I would, suggest to look at some experts and learn what you can.
Awesome. Well, Jacob, thanks so much for spending the time with me. Can you please share with my listeners, because you did tease us that there was a story available,
Yeah.
like where people can find you online, your website, etc.?
Yes. So my website is jacobehess.com. It's JACOBEHESS.com. And anything that you need to find is there. Like I have links to my social medias, but I also have a sign up right there in the first page for my email list. And I'll send you that copy of the short story. And you can also get a free copy of Echoes of Beauty as well at the website, which talks about my beliefs behind aesthetics and beauty and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well,
check it
Jacob,
out.
Thanks again so much.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
I really like Jacob's approach to the story grid and all of the elements involved in terms of the hero's journey and the way he's looked at his manuscript, the way he's looked at his manuscripts, I should say. And I want to come back to the essential action, which is one of those elements that he did a really great job of talking through. In terms of every single scene has to do something. It has to move the story forward. It has to develop character. It has to establish something. There has to be some sort of progression. And he talks a lot about that in terms of the character arc and the character change. Now, during our conversation, I mentioned the idea of the motivation of a character, but I can't help but go back to that, the stage days and the theater days, because it was such a really important aspect for the actor to really properly understand the character's motivation in that scene, however big or however small it was. And it's just a really good reminder to us when we're looking at our story. I was listening to, I think it was the Somewhere Book Show podcast, and there was one of the tips or news items was related to that, where you're looking back at the and the guest host as well talked about this, and I think that was his hot potato of wisdom at the end, where he just talked about looking at it from the reader's perspective. Now, the reader doesn't have to think about these things the same way that we think about them as writers, but I think it's important that they may subconsciously resonate with something because that scene moves the story, the character, the plot. It moves something forward. It's not just there. It's not just slapped in because they needed to slap it in. It does something. It's meant to create a moment that builds on something, whether it's a character or a plot or an action that needs to happen in order for the character to change or grow or learn. And it's easy to see that potentially when you're looking at a structure like potentially a mystery, where there's deductive bits of pieces where the detective learns this and that leads to this and then that leads to that, because you can see that when you splice it out and sort of outline those steps and those details, because it's got a very logical sequence to it. But that's really what the story is, and I guess I'm just fascinated by that concept. And so I was kind of thinking back to it and going and looking, and what I think is maybe a fun exercise is going and looking at things you've written, and you may have done it subconsciously. That's the thing I love about this, is that sometimes, and I think I learned this from Christine Catherine Rush and Dean Wesley Smith and some of their writing workshops, is, you know, in many ways, a lot of story is inherent to us. We just know it's right or we know it's wrong. And we may not understand, what Sean Coyne does with the story grid, but subconsciously we're inserting those elements. We're not even recognizing it sometimes. So it's really, really good to step back and look at it and analyze it and say, oh, okay, here's why this scene, which may not seem critical, here's why this scene is important. And I think that's something that we can see and we can apply when we're watching television shows and movies, and we can recognize some of those elements. It doesn't mean it's not a fun story and we're not enjoying it, but just being able to recognize those. So I know that's a little bit of a meandering thought, but I wanted to share that with you is I was just sort of thinking about how I can become a better writer by trying to apply some of these principles, through things I've written already and understanding it better just by laying that grit over top of it and getting a good feel for it that helps me when I write the next story. How about you? What are some of the things that you got from this episode, from this conversation with Jacob to, help you as a writer? I'd love to hear your comments. You can leave them over at starkreflections.ca for this episode. And that's it for the reflection. Now, post me recording the intro and then editing the interview, I got a delivery of several boxes that were left on my front step. I actually stepped out to run a quick errand, and I got back 15 minutes later and found a whole whack of boxes from Lightning Source, from Ingram Spark, and I was like, I don't remember ordering a giant box of books and a whole bunch of other books. I know I have a few author copies, like ones and twosies and test files or test books that I've created, but I was thinking, wow, that's a lot. What's going on? And lo and behold, remember what I was talking about with those returns? Lo and behold, I got back 30 more hardcovers, mostly the Peter Mitchell book, Rude Awakenings from Sleeping in the Rough. I don't remember selling that many copies. And I guess it's frustrating because when you sell through Ingram, you don't actually see to whom you sold. So you don't know if it's one-offs being sold online through Amazon and other websites, or if it were bookstores actually purchasing in bulk. And apparently must have been bookstores purchasing in bulk. And one of the things that really, really upsets me is there's some hardcovers I got back this time around, little mini hardcover, the 10,000 word short story, and the spine is off on about 3 or 4 of them. So does that mean a bookstore ordered them and then they were just upset because they're misprinted and they came back to me and I'm not the one responsible for the misprinting? Anyways, some choice 4-letter words were used when I opened the box and realized that, okay, I just dropped $600 or almost $600 on returns from a few months ago, and now I'm probably going to get an even bigger invoice that's going to put me even deeper in the hole, maybe as high as $1,200 to $1,500 in the hole. And yeah, wow. So again, double, triple cautionary note for you in terms of making your books returnable, because that can come back to bite you on the buttocks. Hey, I said buttocks. Is that the first time I said buttocks in this podcast? Well, at least I can laugh. Anyways, that is it for my reflection. That is it for my double-ended rant about returns on print-on-demand books. And that's it for episode 230 of the Stark Reflections podcast. So thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I want to thank you, listeners, for tuning in each week. And I want to thank my patrons of the podcast for supporting this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections. I just, as of January 19th, we just had a January reflective roundtable. It was just an open hour hanging out with some of my patrons, and I had 5 of my patrons hang out and chat with me, and I've recorded that, and that'll be coming up. You'll actually see very soon, before next week. Normally the episodes come out every Friday. You'll see episode 231, which will be that reflective roundtable, and it was a really fun discussion. It was not what we thought it was going to be when we started, but boy, that was a really good time. And that'll be coming up probably in just a few days after this episode gets released, because I still have 4 other episodes in the can, and I feel bad because I know I interviewed Jacob, I think it was in mid or early December, and I thought that this episode would have gone live a lot sooner, but I guess I always end up with a few more extras in the can. But that's just me and my disorganization skills. Oh well, what are you gonna do? In any case, thank you again so much for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. If you want to help this podcast, please feel free to leave a review, or better yet, share it with a friend that you think would find value in it. And so, until next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com. You know when you're young and you have lots of ideas of all the things you could be when you grow up? I mean, I had so many dreams of the things I could do, the roles I could play, the jobs I could have. Sometimes the opportunity never happens. And you think back on it. So I was just recently thinking about how when I was really young, I really loved the idea of being a Gregorian monk. But I never got the chance.